Yeah, so happy Thursday night, everybody. Of course, we are doing the second part of Element 23 this week, picking up kind of where we left off. And, we're talking about how you master your thoughts and emotions, becoming that surgical master of your mind. When life throws a challenge at you, how do you handle it? Do you respond out of emotion and get angry and frustrated and feel like a victim? Or do you say, hey, why is this happening to me? What can I take from this? How can I handle this response better than what I typically do? That's where you start creating awareness. You learn and you grow and you move through these things. And for some of us, when we handle emotions, I know one of the things we did, another book thing that we did, they talked about how to process emotions. And Allie and I talked about this. We've done it with Element 4. If your daughter, for example, says something to you that's just totally rude and whatever, your initial response would be, I want to just choke her and fire back like a lion. But basically, if Dr. A says we just slow down, take a drink, and think, and you could use that as a possibility of a teaching moment. Hey, you shouldn't speak to me that way, or change the frequency of the whole conversation. So, with that said, Alan, do you remember where we left off?
I do. We left off on page 462. Mismanaged emotions. And I want to say that my daughter's now in her freshman year of college, but there was a time her senior year, it was rough, y'all. We always say she was soiling the nest to make it less hard for me to say, go off to college. But she eye rolled me so hard one time that her contacts popped out. And then we died laughing so hard that whatever it was, we both just forgot about it. But it was just, I was like, Madeline, that is one heck of an eye roll that you just did to me, but we're just going to laugh that your contacts popped out. Anyway, so we laugh about that whenever she thinks about rolling her eyes. It's pretty fun. So mismanaged emotions. This to me has been such a huge one because when you suffer from anxiety and depression, at least my particular walk with it, and a lot of people's walk with it, is its birthplace is in mismanaged emotions. So emotions aren't inherently bad. Emotions are beautiful gifts, and they're very important for us to feel emotions and to have emotions. How yucky to live a life without any emotions or emotional responses to it. However, emotions have a time and a place. Emotions are meant to be felt and then processed through. And I think somewhere along the line in our life, that becomes more and more difficult to do, or it can become more and more difficult to do without the right tools. And so, this is sort of the sister element of Element 4. So if you think about stop, challenge, and choose, we use that to help with our emotional management. But as you recall, also in Element 4, we talked about above the line and below the line behavior, that victim, villain, hero mentality, and just building an awareness of if we're being any of those things, right? I've been all three at any point during the day. It just it just depends. But catching yourself in that and realizing it doesn't serve you, and then catching yourself getting riled up by an emotion and then trying to make a decision in that emotional state rather than processing it through in a healthy way and being able to then access your thinking brain. These are the things that Dr. Anderson really wants us to be able to grasp, because another thing that being in certain heightened emotional states can do is it causes our brain to release chemicals into our body. And then that can cause weight management issues, but it can also cause issues with just the running of our organs in general. And so, you think depression and anxiety, somebody feels sad or withdrawn or whatever, but there are lots of chemicals wreaking havoc on the body when you're living in that state. Ask me how I know. So, so being able to manage your emotions, that's just one more tool in our toolkit to help us to wellness. Nutrition helps, great sleep helps, healthy hydration helps, healthy surroundings help, a wonderful community, a coach, all those things help. But managing our emotions, that is a muscle that we have to build. Kenny, did you want to say something? Okay. So Dr. Anderson says your management of your emotions will determine how effective you will be in installing and sustaining the habits of health, because emotions drive actions. So one of the things we've talked about when we did Element 4 was What's my inner conversation about my wellness journey? Am I saying I ought to do this? I really should do this? Are we saying I want to do this? Because there's a big difference in the brain. One is a decision and the other is wish-washy emotions. And wish-washy emotions, they are not very supportive of us on days where, we might have a habit go sideways. So mismanaged emotions such as worry, hopelessness, anxiety, and depression are as significant a risk factor as smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. That is how hard it is on the body. In addition, these difficult emotions have considerable effect in our ability to be happy, fulfilled, and successful. And I am a living testament of that. I mean, my life feels so different now that I'm free from that struggle.
Allie,
go
Allie,
ahead.
what page are you on?
Oh, still on page 462.
Thank you, dear.
Yep. So our emotions are here because they helped us survive. And in fact, we take in more negative things than positive things on a daily basis because of a very ancient biological technology that's programmed in us. When we were living out in the wilderness, running around, we had to be very acutely aware of negative things in our environment for survival. But now we don't need that. And so now the way we live now, hopefully a safer life, we don't need to be as in tune to those negative emotions. And in fact, though, it takes 10 positive thoughts to out or erase a negative one. So you think about that, that means it is an active pursuit. We have to actively pursue the positive over the negative, right? You can't, it just doesn't just happen naturally. What happens naturally is the opposite. So we actually we only tend to get angry about stuff that we care about. So it doesn't mean that because you feel angry, you've got permission to act on the anger and that you're right and the other person's wrong. But what it does indicate is you're feeling angry. And this is something that you care about. So this difficult emotion showing up as a signal or a signpost to a reaction to something that's important to us. Okay. So he asks a couple, and what he's doing by giving that example is he's helping us. He wants us to appreciate what we're feeling, and he wants us to acknowledge it. He wants us to unpack where it's coming from and not just have it come over us and then drive our action. Like he wants us to pause and go, where is this emotion coming from? Have you ever had an emotion come up about something and you're like, that emotion isn't even the appropriate response to this, but it's just your brain is pulling from something in the past that's not even relevant to your life anymore, but it brings this emotion forwards because that's just the old wiring doing that. But when you pause and you unpack it, you go, oh, that's not even, I don't even, this emotion, I'm going to shut it down because it's not truthful right now. So he's got some great questions on page 463. Can you think of a time when you avoided an emotional situation by stopping or repressing it? And how did that work for you? Was there a time when you actually understood why you were feeling a certain way and you responded appropriately? And how did that work out for you? Those were some great questions for me because it always worked out better when I had the more appropriate emotional response, but my autopilot settings were bad because I had been in depression and anxiety. So I had to stop my autopilot and start building this awareness. Our ability to control our lives is also very important in managing the state of our emotional well-being. We know that people who are in control of their lives are healthier, more cheerful, and more active. So he goes over some a little scenario that was done in a nursing home, and it had a really interesting results. When the locus of control, which is what he calls us controlling our emotions, when that's within us and we feel we're dictating the conditions of our life, we're emotionally better off. And when we feel like life is happening to us and we have no control over anything, that causes us to have a very negative walk through our time. I don't know what y'all, I'm sorry about my words tonight, but it is, I could use 14 cups of coffee right now. So I'm stumbling over myself, but I hope you're getting what I'm saying. And I'm actually going through this right now with my husband's parents. his mother every day, instead of waking up and going, oh my gosh, I've been given another day, like, who am I going to see today that's going to brighten my day? What am I going to do today? Like, I'm excited to see what the day is going to bring. She starts off by going, they're late coming to get me to breakfast. I mean, it's just negative, 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 negative. And she has this self-fulfilling prophecy of a very negative day because she's just concentrating on how the world's going to come at her, and she's going to take everything negatively rather than being more responsive and going, oh, they're a little bit late. Well, that's okay. That'll give me time to, do my Bible study first. I've always wanted to do that before breakfast. I can do that before breakfast today. And then I can go, I won't be late for crafts or whatever. But she just couldn't get to that. And you know what? It made her condition there. It made her go downhill fast because that positivity wasn't there. And we tried to help her find it, but it just wasn't something that she at this point was able to pull from. There was no pause. She's tired. She doesn't feel good. When you don't feel good, how hard is it to control your emotional state? Why is it so important that we we bring the nutrition along with us and get our body running right? Because then that gives us the space to then go in there and start doing our emotional management. Let's see where I want to go to. This kind of explains what I was talking about just a second ago with my personal experience with my mother-in-law. There are some people that think they aren't enough. They believe they are deficient in some way, or there's something lacking in their surroundings or the world that surrounds them. And that plays a part for them not taking control of their emotional management. Self-guilt, self-disgust, remorse, all these things harming them biologically, which we saw, releasing cortisol, suppressing the immune system, wreaking havoc on our metabolic and inflammatory pathways. So, I mean, again, as we're older, it becomes that much more important that we have a handle on this. It's not just, our ability to have that emotional management and control what our brain is releasing to our body. It makes a huge, huge, huge difference, especially with even inflammatory response. So I love on page 457, I talk about this all the time. I'm skipping a little bit ahead, but this, I already talked about the 10,000-year-old design for survival. So, but the brain can basically be separated into three parts. The super big part is the lizard brain. That's all the stuff in our body that runs on automatic, like, perspiring, your eyes watering, blinking, things like that. And then there's your Labrador brain, which is your emotional response to the world around you, right? And then there's your human thinking brain. Now, what's really interesting is when you're working in the Labrador brain, you cannot access the thinking brain. So, you've ever heard someone say, don't make a decision in anger because you'll regret it, because you don't get it from your thinking brain if you make it in anger. Don't make a decision, in grief. Like, let it process. When we make decisions in a really deep, big emotion, we're not making it out of our thinking brain, and we're going to miss something. And then we're going to be really like, oh man, I shouldn't have decided that then. That was not a good time for me. Since we were born with only two fears, the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises, that's interesting, isn't it? Everything else we fear is learned by experience from someone else. Fear of success, failure, death, spiders, snakes, heights, and sharks are all things that have been conditioned in us. I was laughing with Kenny, forget when we were talking about it, but I live on a farm, snakes, mice, spiders, whatever. But I was conditioned as a child. I lived in Charleston, South Carolina, where the roaches are about this large and they're very friendly. And they like to come touch your face and tell you bedtime stories, and it's awful. And I was conditioned from a child that roaches are the most horrible thing on the planet. And so I'll handle a poisonous snake and talk to you like nothing's going on. But if Allison Stone sees a roach, I'm out. I'm screaming, I'm running, and you're harmless. They don't do anything to you. But I was conditioned that roaches are awful. And so so that's one of the things, that is completely true. Everything else has been conditioned in us It doesn't have to be a logical reason, like roaches, being afraid of roaches is not logical at all. It's just a conditioned reflex. So, you know, I have found in my experience that things that strike fear in me, when I take the time to pause and learn about them and understand them more, a lot of times the fear is replaced with my thinking brain. I get out of my emotion, I get in my thinking brain, and when you understand something, it takes the fear out of it. You know, it's not an unknown anymore. And so I love that stop, challenge, choose, where we can do that. We can pause in that emotional moment. We can look at whatever it is that's frightening us, and then we can start to learn about it or learn from it. You know, if you have a fear of failure, you can absolutely change that into something different, which is, oh, when I fail, it gives me an opportunity to see a place that I could do some work in, so that I can get over this obstacle and be stronger than I was before. Failure, you know, obstacles, they're a gift, but people don't always come to them looking at them that way. So it's just another one of those, it's an emotional management issue. We don't need to suppress our emotions. I don't want you guys to take from element 23 at all that we are to suppress our emotions. We are emotions, again, are a beautiful gift, and we are meant to experience them, but we're not supposed to hold on to them for too long. I like to think of them as clouds coming through. They come through, we experience them, and they move on out. I still work on, okay, this is a good example. So have you ever had somebody make you mad? Okay. And they made you mad, and then it was done, and you went off to whatever you were doing for the day, and they went off to whatever they were doing for the day. And 3 hours later, you find your brain going, you know what? I should have said no, and you know, I can't believe they had the no. And you go, why am I talking about this? That argument is over. We're done. We moved on. And then you go, stop. And then at dinner time, you're like, oh, do you know what happened to me? Do you know what so-and-so did to me today? And then you're back into it, and it keeps surfacing and surfacing and surfacing. Have you guys ever had that? That is not emotional management. So that is something we work on, you know, in that moment, in that moment of conflict. We have the time where we calm down. We try and look at it from a logical point of view. Sometimes our relationships aren't very logical, but we give people grace, or we give understanding that maybe they're blowing up at me today actually had nothing to do with me at all, because they've got a lot going on, and it was just an emotional response on their part. But we process it and we move on. And it's so much healthier than keep stirring that up later in the day, and then again 3 days later. So it's an emotional awareness. Researchers have come to a consensus that there are 8 primary emotions. This is on page 469. I highlighted them because I thought it was important to know what these primary emotions are. We've got anger, sadness, surprise, fear, acceptance, disgust, joy, and anticipation. So like primary colors, when we combine primary emotions, we can create secondary ones, but these are the base primary emotions. You can find an expanded chart of the emotions on the habitsofhealth.com website if you want to check that out. And that shows over 70 positive and negative emotions. But it doesn't matter what all the emotions are, but we want to start building an awareness of when they well up and what's causing them to well up. And then we can process it through and access our thinking brain, and we can learn something from it. And it's interesting, there'll be things that trigger you and cause an emotional response, and we'll put an emotion there when one isn't needed. And so this is going to help everybody in their relationships, and having better relationships with each other also helps your health and well-being. You know, a lot of times I've been married for, gosh, almost 25 years, and you carry this backpack of stuff, of experiences and conversations and happy things and arguments in this backpack, this imaginary backpack. So sometimes when you're having a discussion with your spouse, they might say something and you assign an emotion to it immediately, but it doesn't belong. It's just something that you're getting because, well, 10 years ago, you know, he said something like that, and no. When we build this emotional intelligence and this emotional awareness, we can have conversations where we just take what each other is saying at face value, and we're not putting an emotion, a triggered emotion there that doesn't belong. And that's a beautiful release to be able to do that, right? Because that really does help heal in relationships. And so our first step is becoming aware of the different emotions we're feeling, and then simply sense whether they're directly supportive of our values, they're positive, or if they're difficult and unsupportive. So pulling, an emotion being assigned from a trigger response for something that's not even going on right now, but that's just what your brain wants to do. Building the awareness that that's what's happening, that emotion really doesn't belong here. Oh my gosh, it's huge. It's such a relief to be able to do that. Kenny, do you want to say something?
Well, I'm trying to be mindful of our time, but I wanted to jump in.
Yeah,
I
sorry.
think it's important for all of us, regardless of where you're at in this health journey, to track where you're at every now and then. Take a day and just say, okay, I'm going to write down these 7 or 8 emotions. Where do you spend most of your time? Is it thinking about joy? Is it worrying? Is it anticipation? Whether that's a good anticipation or bad, because that can be 2 different things there. Do you spend it in anger? But I would write down those 8 things, and maybe every hour or so check in with yourself and see where you're at. Create some, because here again, we think about 80,000 thoughts a day. And if you spend 75,000 of them in the bad place, how do you think your day is going to be? How do you think your health is going to be? How do you think your next day is going to be? Because if you go to bed pissed off and frustrated, you're going to wake up pissed off and frustrated the next day, probably. So you just got to, creating that awareness around your emotions and where you spend your time, I think is really important.
472 has that checklist if you want, that Kenny was talking about. That's a great little mental checklist. And maybe a couple of times you have this paper out somewhere and you can do it, but you'll get to where it's an emotional checklist that you can run over automatically in your head. You'll just know.
Yeah. So, and I'll give an example. Most of my days I spend worrying about what all I've got to do and not thinking about how much I've accomplished. So it's always, the glass is always half full, not look what a great job I've done. I'm always thinking about, I got to go do this. I got to go do that. I got to get this done. I got to get that done. I got to do, this tax report or whatever. And I will put some of that stuff on and I will put it off for months. And it literally takes me 10 minutes to do it. And I'm like, I've been wasting months of time thinking about this and I need to get it done. And so that's the great thing about Optavia that I love. And that's why Dr. A says, when you have an emotion or stressed over about something, don't just think about it, just go do it. Just get it done and knock it out. And that way you move beyond that obstacle and you move forward. And then you kind of settle into that solace that you got that task completed. And then look, I feel really good when I get those things done. I'm like, why did I put that off so long? When it was just going through the motions of doing it. Yes, it may have been a little bit stressful, but I got it done. And now I don't have to stress about it anymore. And he also says, knowing where we feel the emotion can help us develop maturity when dealing with that emotion. Mm-hmm. So if you spend your day thinking you're not worthy enough, that you're not doing good in your journey, and you fill in the blanks, maybe you want to walk 2 miles every day. Maybe you're only walking a mile, or maybe you don't barely walk any of that day. But you get up and you do everything else right. You're so focused on what you don't do, you don't think about what's going well. Mm-hmm. So you've got to develop some of that maturity when it comes to not looking at everything as half full, but what look how far I've come, And so that's where you got to learn and grow. And that's where going to this mental gym that we talk about and working in this, y'all are doing it right now. Y'all are at the mental gym. And so just like Tracy Portillo said the other day, she lost 100 pounds. But her brain was back there and she'd only lost 20. So her brain was 80 pounds heavier than her body was. She said, I've got to do some work to bridge that gap so that my brain can catch up and go beyond where my body is. And that's a good push-pull to have when your brain outpaces your body. If Tracy's brain loses 130 pounds and she's only at 100, she knows what she's got to do. She gonna get it done, get into action. And that's where, where we as we talk about setting goals and dreaming and living this thing out loud and moving forward. When you start building momentum, you start stacking those wins every day before you go to bed. What did I do great today? I drank all my water today. I did all this. Don't say, well, I didn't eat 6 times a day. Don't beat yourself up over it, but you got to think about every day. You got to ask yourself, what am I winning at? You start changing the way you look at things, and everything starts beginning to change. Go ahead, Allie. I'm sorry.
I just want to say to take this with you guys, and I know Val's heard this before, but one of the things that really helped me is every single day for a month, I did this exercise with myself, and it's called the GLAD exercise. And so with the GLAD exercise, you write down something you're grateful for. You write down something you learned. You write down something you accomplished. And you write down something that delighted you. Now, I like to do that at bedtime because it gets my mind set on, look at all the cool stuff from today. And that old cycle of wanting to spin, like Kenny said, of the one thing that I didn't get accomplished, or the one thing I was worried about, or I'd been procrastinating, that's kicked off to the side. And I focused on what I'm grateful for, what I learned, what I accomplished, and what delighted me. So we call that the GLAD exercise. But that's a good start. That's a good awareness building tool. And it helps do that mindset shift. It helps squelch that negativity, that anxiety. And like I said, before bedtime, it helps me really have a great night's sleep because I go to bed happy thinking about what a great day, what a fulfilling day that it's been.
Yeah. And what I just talked about is actually on page 472, your emotions chart. So It's an emotion checklist. What am I feeling? Check the box. And he says, are you sure you're feeling that? What other two options could it be? And where is it moving in your body? And one thing that Dr. A says, and we've learned too, and another thing too, when you feel an emotion, when you feel anger, if you allow that emotion about 90 seconds and just breathe, you will find that it will move through your body. For some people, fear goes to their stomach.
Mm-hmm.
So, you let that feeling go through your stomach, and then you need to envision it going out of your feet, working it out of your body, and take that 90 seconds to breathe and let it go. And then you just take a big, deep breath and say, okay, let's move forward. And you let that emotion go.
We're in such a fast-paced world. We are in such a go, 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 go world that we have completely lost track of the power of pausing and processing. And it is worth it. It is not a waste of time. It is a very important action step.
Yep. And so he just talks about that. He says it right here on page 473. On average, an emotion will last 90 seconds if you do not interfere with it. So if you stay after it, you will continue to feel it. You got to breathe it in, breathe it out, let it move through your body, envision it going out of your body. So this is where you become that emotional surgical master of your mind. You take that emotion, instead of letting it ruin your day and rule your day, you take charge and say, hey, you got to get out. I'm going to breathe and let you go, and then I'm moving forward. And that's where you start becoming that surgical master of your mind. It takes practice. This is not something that you're going to master overnight. But what you'll find is when you feel good in your body, and you're doing what you've got to do in your health journey. So when your body feels good, and then you have this emotion, you'll find that it doesn't take you as long to take that emotion and process it and take it and flush it out and go from bad to good. And it takes some practice.
Take the time to fill out these questions. I'm not saying you have to do it all in one sitting. I actually wouldn't. I would just do one page and then just kind of rest there for the day or the week. But take the time to go through it and do it periodically. But it's a good, this is such a great one to hit right before Thanksgiving and Christmas when things get crazy and chaotic. Practicing that pause and recognizing emotions, and if they're lingering around, this is such a great time to do that.